This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so we are continuing with Chavos Halvavos, Duties of the Heart, Shar Bitachon, the Gateway of Trust, Paragimel, the third chapter, and in the Safaria it is 4:3. We're going to go from 47. Just to backtrack, hello Robin. Just to backtrack just a little bit. So he had been discussing the age-old question of tzaddik viralo, rasha v'tovlo, the tzaddik that everything is good for the tzaddik who suffers and the wicked who prosper. And he said that there are many different factors. We don't know most of them that Hashem has in his cheshbonot, but he's going to share some of them. And last week we ended off, why is it that the righteous will sometimes suffer? So he says, first of all, it might be that there is some sin that they did kodem, prior, and it's not clear. Does he mean, it probably covers both. Does it mean earlier in one's life, before he might have been or she might have been such a tzaddik or tzaddiket, or does it mean in a gilgul, in a previous iteration that a person might have had here, and therefore that needs to be corrected? So that's one possibility. Another possibility is that this is that a person will thereby gain that much more olam haba, meaning world to come, paradise afterwards. Meaning, if this world is a very, very limited time that we have, the more that we can accomplish here, and if we can remain devoted and strong, even when we're going through difficulties, so then that will certainly raise exponentially the change, the transformation that brings to us, and that we would thereby bring into the next world. And also he says there are those that it is that others will see the difficulties that this person is going through and is still staying strong and resolute, and that will be an inspiration to others. And then, of course, that will then serve to elevate this person, because what elevates a person in the world to come is not just what they've done, but the good that they've left over here, and the good that continues to be generated as a result of them and the way that they lived their life. V'yesh, I think this is number 47, and that's where we left off last week. V'yesh, continuing with a few more reasons. Sheyiyeh l'rasha anshe doro. There are those that it will be because of the evil of that person's generation. V'yivchanheu habore, and Hashem will then put this person through some difficulties in order to show ba'oni uvereish uvechalaim, right, with poverty, or with maladies, with illnesses, laharot chasiduto v'avodato, and to show that this person is going to stay strong with their righteousness and their serving and their serving God, mibal adehem, right? Even in spite of all that those around them are doing. Kamosha Nemar. And now he's quoting a chapter. This is chapter 53 in Isaiah. Okay? And this is a pasuk. This is a chapter that Christians say, oh, it's talking about the suffering servant. And this is talking about Jesus. And our understanding is it's talking about either Bnei Yisroel, the children of Israel, or it's talking about the Mashiach. The only problem is he hasn't yet come yet. So it can't be talking about someone who lived a couple of thousand years ago, right? So it could be talking about the Mashiach also. But the simple understanding is as it is throughout Yeshayahu, that Bini, my son, is a reference to Klal Yisrael, and that is indisputed until it gets to that chapter where others want to say that no, now it refers to Yunahu. But it's interesting how he's learning this. As it says, Achein Chalinu, right? We were sick. The nations of the world will recognize that we were sick. Hu nasa umach ovenu savlam. will recognize that it was hu nasa, it was our illness that he carried, meaning we are the ones who caused them all of these sarot, all these difficulties. Umach ovenu savlam, and they went through this machov, these pains, right, because of their righteousness, and by doing so, when the redemption comes, it is very, very clear that they are deserving, because we were taking all of our. It's fascinating. Rabbi Sachs writes this, that anti-Semitism always takes the worst issues of their world, and those are the Jews, right? Nowadays, what's the worst thing? Colonialists. Oh, so all of a sudden the Jews become colonialists, right? The worst thing is apartheid. Oh, that means the Jews become apartheid. For the communists, the Jews were these capitalists. For the capitalists, the Jews were the communists, right? So it's always our sickness of the nations that they put on to us, and that we carried all of their maladies. Whatever they thought was the worst thing possible, that immediately became that which they pinned upon the Jews. So according to this reason that he's given, it's that in order that with all those difficulties, we stay strong. And that way, when the redemption comes, it is very, very clear that we are deserving of it. And lastly, and there are those she'enenu lelokim lakachat hadin me'anshe doro, that a righteous person might be held responsible, accountable for not getting others in line. He did not have that zealotry for God to bring to din, to bring to justice the people of his generations, right? And therefore, they're held accountable, right? If we're able to change or help others and we don't, then we are held accountable. That we had in a few parshas ago, we had the Brit of Arvut, the covenant of Arvut, which is co-responsibility, that we are all responsible for one another. As we find, Kamoshi Yadata Minyan Eli Ubanav. Eli was the Kohen Gadol, right? This is when the Mishkan, when the tabernacle was in Shiloh, and Shmuel Hanavi, Samuel the prophet, right, grew up under the tutelage of Eli HaKohen, and Eli's sons, Chofni and Pinchas, they were not acting in a proper manner, according to the literal reading of the Navi. So it says that they were sleeping with other women, and the way our sages understand it is that they were debasing the sacrifices and being very, very very tardy, very lackadaisical about bringing the sacrifices. So normally when a woman, after she gave birth, there were sacrifices that needed to be brought. So Norman, if the Mishkan is running properly, then she could leave her sacrifices there and go back home to her husband, knowing that they will be sacrificed properly. But because they were not being careful with the sacrifices, the woman stayed there and stayed there and stayed there in order to make sure it would be done properly. And only when they saw it was done properly, only then would they return home. So they were keeping the wives of other men sleeping there in Jerusalem, as opposed to them going back home and sleeping at home. And that's how they describe it. But either way, they were not acting properly. So Eli is held responsible for not getting his sons in order. And even amongst the sons, Chofni and Pinchas was not nearly as bad as Chofni, but they're lumped together because Pinchas could have rebuked, censured Chofni and gotten him in line, and he did not. And therefore, he has to carry some of that responsibility. As we know, as he writes, by the story there of Eli and his sons, She'amar b'hem HaKatuv, the Pasuk says about them, Vaya kol hanotar b'veitecha, yavo lishtachavot lo, la'agurat kesef v'kikar lechem. That all those who will be left in the house, right? And again, even though Pinchas did not sin as much as Chofni, but they're all included in that, right? And they'll have to be, and they will be destitute going forward. So that sentence was pronounced on both of the brothers, even though one was a lot more active than the other, because the other one could have rebuked and censured and gotten him a line and did not. So those are all possible reasons that he gives as to why the righteous suffer. Aval tovat hakel yibarach al harasha. Now let's go on the flip side. The good that Hashem sometimes will bring onto those who seem to be non-deserving of that. Well, who knows what good thing this person might have done at some point. And therefore, Hashem will pay that person back here in this world. As the pasuk says in Deuteronomy, literally, he'll pay to those who hate him on their faces to cause them to be lost. And that's explained. Rishonim, or tavan, Hashem will pay back to all of these evildoers any merit that they have. And that way, when they get to the world to come, frightening idea, when they come to the world to come, they've got nothing left on their credit. You know, famous story with I think it was the Bitachon-Trust, who always would find zechut, would always find something positive in different people. So someone came to him and said, Rabbi, it says in the Shema that if you won't listen to the mitzvot, the heavens will stop, there won't be sustenance, there won't be rains, right? Well, Rabbi, I don't observe anything at all. And I'm so wealthy. Everything's going great for me. So the Rebbe says to him, and how do you know that that's not supposed to be the case? He said, because it says that in the Shema. See, he says, that means you said the Shema? If you said the Shema even once in your entire life, all the riches of the world can't compensate for having said Shema, right? So who knows what payment the person might be getting in this world for what that person might have done. When I was a teenager, I was learning in Israel post high school. I had the absolute privilege of spending a Shabbos with Rav Hillel Zaks, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, who is the grandson of the Chafetz Chaim. There's a whole story how we got to his house. But a close friend of mine and I spent Shabbos there. And I asked him the following question. I asked him, we know that God is just in everything that he does. And we have teachings that all the pleasures of this world can't equal a moment of pleasure in the world to come, right? And the way that that's explained, I didn't say this thing, but the way that's explained, I've later learned, is that if you take all the pleasure, all the good feelings that you've had in the past week and condense that into 10 minutes, that'd be a great 10 minutes. Now take the past year and condense it into 5 minutes. Wow, that would be a jubilation, right? And then take the past 50 years or 40 years, 30 years, and put that into 1 minute, right? It'll just be exhilarating. We'll just be bursting. Now take all the pleasure, all the good feelings you've had over your entire life, and put that into 1 second. Imagine just how amazing that 1 second would be. That's what is meant when we say that all the pleasures of this world don't equal 1 moment in the world to come. So if that's the case, then how is it just to pay a rasha, an evildoer, an evil person, how is it just for God to pay that person their reward here in this world? It's giving them counterfeit. It's giving them some, what do you call it, wooden nickels. That's what we're giving them, instead of giving them the olam haba, which is so much greater. How is that just? So he explained to me, he said as follows. He said, if a person is doing a spiritual act, so then the reward has to be in the spiritual world that is so incredibly, overwhelmingly good. However, a person is a real rasha. So even the mitzvah they do, they're doing it in a very, very physical base way. Therefore, it's just that they receive their reward here in this world. So number one that the Chosov Avos says is a person might be um, receiving their reward here in this world. V'yesh, secondly, shetia al derech hapikadon etzlo. Achitin lo hakel yibarach ben sadik yeroila. Right? Maybe it's a deposit that God is placing it by this person in order that this person's son or daughter who will be righteous will be the ones who will get it. So it's like a deposit. It's God puts it there in a holding pattern in order that it will be there for the tzaddik who comes afterwards. As the pasuk says, Yachin, this person will prepare, V'tzadik yilavesh, and the righteous person yilavesh, he's the one who will wear it, who will wear this garment. And the Gemara elsewhere tells a story of a person who was building this fantastic palace, right? And he was not deserving to have this fantastic palace, but why was it important that there would be this palace? Because 50 years later, a tzaddik is going to walk by and need some shade. At that point, the whole palace would be in ruins, but one wall would still be standing, and the tzaddik would be able to, the righteous person would be able to rest there in the shade. So sometimes it is yachin, a person prepares it, the tzaddik yilavesh, and then at a later point, the righteous person gets to wear it. V'amar, and it says also in Kohelet, v'lachoti natan inyan le'esof v'lechnos, and to this person who's not a good person, who's a chote, a sinner, Hashem gave him this initiative, this drive, le'asof v'lechnos, to gather, to collect a lot, to become very wealthy. Why? Latate, latov lifnei ha'elokim, in order that ultimately it'll be given to one who is good before in the eyes of God. So secondly, he says sometimes it is this pikadon, it is this deposit that comes to a person in order that that person's heirs, who will be rightly and justly deserving of it, will get it. The efshar is possible. Another possibility, shetia siba hagdula shebisibot moto v'ra'ato. Right? It could be that all of this greatness that Hashem is giving to him, that is in order to lead to their destruction, to their demise. As it says in Kohelet, Osher shamur leba'alav l'ra'oto, that the wealth is set aside for its owners, l'ra'ato, for their detriment, right? And what might be a perfect example of that? He doesn't bring this example, but I would say Haman, right? All of the glamour and the wealth that he was and the honor that he was afforded, that pumped him up so much until basically he burst, until ultimately the gallows that he prepared for Mordechai were the gallows that he himself was hung upon. So at times a person can become so full of themselves, so full and so haughty, that ends up being their downfall. The efshar, and it's possible, shetia laharicha boritolalo ad sheyashuv v'yeroila kamo sheyadata mi'inyan menashe. Or it could be that Hashem, yes, right now this person is not doing all that well journey of life, but Hashem is giving it to them. Hashem has the patience and knows this person will, in the end, will do teshuvah and will ultimately be deserving of it. As we know by Menashe. Menashe was one of the worst kings. And he actually put an idol into the Beit HaMikdash, right? But in the end, he did teshuvah. In the end, he repented. He turned around, and therefore Hashem's got that long view on history and knows what might come afterwards. And therefore, since this person will do teshuvah in the end, so therefore they'll get it now, so they'll have it at that point. V'yesh shetiyeh lechesed shekadam aviv. Or it might be that the person is inheriting this good, meaning not necessarily inheriting the wealth, but inheriting that his father or his predecessors did a certain act of chesed. And this person merited that his son or sons or children would gain as a result of that. As Hashem said to Yehu ben Nimshi, right? Hashem said to Yehu was the one that he destroyed the house of Achav. Achav was a tremendous Rasha, and Yehu destroyed the house of Achav, and therefore he merited that he and his generations, I think 4 generations, would sit on the throne, right? Even though they were not worthy, they were not righteous, but in the merit of their father, they were able to sit on the throne. So that they received was because of the acts of their father. As we find by Yehu ben Nimshi, b'nei Revaim yeshvu l'chal kisei Yisroel. Right, 4 generations will sit on the throne of Israel. The Amar, and it says, mitalech bitumo tzaddik ashrei banav acharav. Someone goes in their fullness as a tzaddik, right? Blessed, fortunate are their children afterwards. The Amar, and it says, Nar Hayiti, we're familiar with this, is from benching. We sing it, Nar Hayiti Gam Zakanti. I was young, I became old. V'lo ra'isi tzadik ne'ezav. I did not see a righteous person who was deserted. V'zaro mevakesh lachem. And his children seeking out bread. Okay? So therefore we see that sometimes the children will receive in the merit, in the zechut of the parent. Right, this pasuk is a pasuk that has troubled many. Right, we have seen many times a tzaddik and his children all in need of bread. Right, certainly we read stories about the Holocaust and what was going on there in the ghettos, and you had many righteous people and their children in need of bread. And there are a number of approaches. Right? One approach, Rabbi Sachs says very beautifully, Lo ra'iti doesn't mean I never saw. Right? Remember, Esther said to Achashverosh, Eich er'eh, how could I watch when this tragedy will befall my people? So ra'iti means to watch passively and not do what one can do to remedy the situation. So in that case, David is saying, from my youth to my old age, I never sat idly when I saw a tzaddik who seemed to be deserted and his children in need of bread, but rather I worked to help them, to remedy that situation. Another way of looking at it is, I never saw a tzaddik ne'ezav v'zara mevakesh lachem, meaning even when they were so destitute that he and his children are seeking bread, I never saw that the tzaddik was ne'ezav, right? It's meaning God never deserts his people. He puts each of us through whatever it is that we need to endure, whatever it is we need to experience, but we're not ne'ezav. So even in that state, we're not deserted by Hashem. So even in that state of mevakesh lechem, of needing the bread, but David said that tzaddik was not ne'ezav. Okay. V'yesh shetiyeh lenasot. Another reason why the wicked might prosper is lenasot. Anshe hatarmit. This will end up being a test for those who appear to be so righteous. V'matzfonim haraim. Right? But actually inside, they're not quite as righteous as they like to exhibit on the outside. And this will out them, so to speak. When they say this guy who's doing terrible things, who's a rasha, and yet life is so incredible, then they say, hey, they will very quickly abandon ship. Mimarim lasur me'avodat habore. They're very, very quick to drop the service of Hashem. V'chashim, and they rush litratzot el anshe haresha, to go be on the side, to emulate, to be in the good graces of those who are doing bad. V'lilmod mimaaseyim, and to learn from their acts, to emulate them. Bidvarer davar le'elokim. Right? And that way it becomes very, very clear, right? Where do they actually stand vis-a-vis God? V'yireh haneman b'avodato b'savlo 8 shesholten bo u'mevaishin oto. And then they'll see that the one who is trustworthy in Hashem's avoda, that even though these guys are prospering, right, he'll continue to serve Hashem. V'sovlim and v'savlo, and he will absorb that these evildoers are ruling over them and are humiliating him, and he's staying true to the team, true to the boss, true to being a proper Jew. V'yikabel sechar mehabore, right, and he will receive reward for that from the Creator, Yitaleh. Alzeh, right, for this, for staying strong even when it was so difficulty. Kamoshi adat me'inyan Eliyahu im Izevel, right? As we know from Eliyahu Hanavi, that after he had that showdown with the prophets of Baal, and the fire came down to his sacrifice and not to their sacrifice, so the prophets of Baal, these false prophets of this idolatry, were put to death. And then Izevel, who was the wife of Achav, was furious, and she wanted to kill Eliyahu Hanavi. And Eliyahu Hanavi had to run away. He had to run away. That's when he lies down, the heat of the sun, and then, right, so he needs to run away. So we see that there are times that the evil will prosper, and then that will out all those who are just on the outside to Hashem, but inside they're not. They'll drop it all, and those who are stalwart will continue. The Yirmiyahu, and also the Navi Yirmiyahu in Malchei Doro, with the kings of his generation, right? Those who are doing the Nach Yomi, the chapter a day of Navi. So we're in the midst of Yirmiyahu now, about 3/4 of the way into Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, and it's incredible. He gets thrown into pits, he gets thrown into prison, right? Because he is speaking the truth, speaking the prophecies, and that's not what they want to hear. They wanted to hear from the false prophets. Don't worry, keep doing what you're doing. Everything will be fine. You got nothing to worry about. And he ended up paying for it. All right. Yeah, he doesn't mention here, but Yisroel Hanavi was killed by his grandson. I believe it was Menashe that we mentioned before. Right? He was killed by his grandson for the prophecies that he was giving that were not the prophecies that people wanted to hear. They wanted to believe the false prophets who were saying everything's fine, don't worry, just keep on doing what you're doing. And yeah, so we have many of the very righteous who suffered at the hands of Rishaim. The Kevan Shehit Barech Chiyuv Hagilgul Ala Sibot Al Bnei Adam. So now that we have shown that a person must take steps, go through the means in order to gain one's parnasa, Nivarer Ata will now explain, Ki ein kol adam chayav lahachzor al kol siba misibat hateref. Well, every person does not need to follow every avenue of finding one's livelihood. Kiasibot rabot, because there are so many different pathways, professions, things that a person can do in order to earn their livelihood. Mehen nakalot, there are those that are pretty easy. Shetirchan ma'at, that it doesn't take that much labor. Kischora bechanut, like doing business in a store. O melechet yad, or shetarcha ma'at, or some sort of a craft, some sort of working with one's hands, but in a light manner. Ketfira, like sewing. Ke'ichoi, or ichoi is weaving, I believe. V'hasvarut, or working as a scribe. V'atzor ha'mischarim, or being in charge of different warehouses where different merchandise is being stored. Usichia harisim v'apoalim, v'ashamashim ba'avodas ha'adama, or to work as the one who hires the field hands, the workers, right, who are out there working the land, working the fields. So those are all physically lighter forms of professions. And there are those causes, means of parnasa, which causes a lot of hard work, the Torah, and a lot of physical labor and difficulty. Ki ibud harot, processing leathers. Hotzaat habarzel v'nachosh v'oferet min motzehem, mining, taking out all these different minerals from the earth. Zikuk hakesef oferet, or purifying silver. V'nasu hamasot hagvedot, or carrying heavy packages, heavy burdens. V'lechet b'drachim rechokim tamid, or traveling to faraway places very often. V'avodas hadama, or working the land. Charishita, and plowing it. V'chayotze bahem, and other such difficult things. Umishuhu mivnei adam chazak begufo, someone who has the physical strength, the chalash b'hakarato, but maybe not the sharpest knife in the drawer, as we say, right? So then, ra'ui lo mehen ma sheyesh bo min hayagia, so he is well suited for some physical work. Kafi she'achol lisbol, that he's able to carry. Umishu chalash begufo, v'hakarato chazaka, someone who might be a little weaker when it comes to one's constitution, one's physical abilities, but hakarato, one's understanding and acumen is chazaka, is strong. Al yivakesh mesibot hateref mashim yage gufo, so he would not look for means of sustenance, livelihoods, from that which takes much physical labor. Ach yateh el mashi yakal al gufo, v'yichal latmid alav, rather he will turn to that which will be easier, lighter on the body. V'yichal latmid alav, and that's something that one will be able to do in a consistent basis. You know, it's interesting. We see how there's so much more work that is not labor intensive, right? That's not physically labor intensive. How the world, at least the very technologically advanced world, right? It's funny. I get together with my siblings. I talk about what our kids are doing, and half the time we can't explain what they do. They do it well. They're earning a nice parnasa. Exactly what they're doing. We're a bunch of elephants over here, dinosaurs, right? But yeah, but everyone, I'll go on to say, right? Everyone has their drive and that which they find inspiring, interesting, fulfilling, and that is where a person shoots to get their parnasa. And but we'll see later on. Important point that I'll make. He doesn't use this term, but a beautiful term is a person can be zoreya b'makam echad v'kotzer b'makam acher. Person can plant in one place and harvest elsewhere. In other words, we need to make our hishtadlus. We need to put in our efforts and try, but ultimately Hashem does send the bracha, sometimes in the places where we planted and sometimes from elsewhere. But we need to make our attempt, and the bracha then does come. Okay, let's pause over here. Where are we in Sefaria? 4-3 what, my friends?
60.
4-3-60. Okay. Adam. Yesh Chayfetz. Okay, let's pick up here next week. Bezrat Hashem. I wish everybody a good week and a Gemar Chatima Tova. If I won't see you before Yom Kippur, I'm going to run to davening. I need to run to the JCC for that program tonight. Okay. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Bye.